All right, welcome back, Sebastian here. So time for my preview for the 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix. So as always, taking a look at the circuit layout for this weekend's race, of course held on the Hungaroring. So the Hungaroring circuit, pretty old school track, one of the older tracks on the F1 calendar, very narrow, known as Monaco without walls, overtaking quite difficult, with a pretty old school unique layout, with plenty of kind of medium speed corners that you don't really see on a lot of other circuits on the F1 calendar. So taking a look at Sector 1, this is where the best overtaking opportunity is at Turn 1, before the track, of course, falls away towards Turns 2 and 3. And of course, sometimes even if you're overtaking at Turn 1, you can get a cutback and get a better run out of Turn 1 into Turn 2 to retake that position going up to the up to this kind of straight towards climb towards Turn 4, which is the start of Sector 2. Now, Sector 2, overtaking basically impossible here. A lot of twisty medium speed corners here, and of course you have the Turn 6-7 chicane, pretty low speed, that one. And again, not a whole lot of overtaking these days anyway. Before we finally get into Sector 3, which is basically the run down to Turn 12, and basically the double hairpins to end the lap, Turn 13 and 14, which of course getting an exit, a really good exit out of that Turn 14 is really important to being able to overtake into Turn 1 that following lap. Where of course on that main straight we do have the, technically there's two DRS zones. There's one going down the main straight and then a second one going down to Turn 2. So two different DRS zones around the lap. So the track itself, 4.381 kilometers in length, and we're expected to have 70 laps of racing on Sunday. Race lap record, a 1:16.627 set by Lewis Hamilton 2020. Highly doubt that's going to get broken this year just because these ground effect cars are not quite as good as the 2020 Mercedes in slow speed corners. Now, the average speed of that lap, 206 kilometers an hour, which ranks 21st out of the 24 tracks on this year's calendar. So this is one of the slower tracks on the F1 calendar. Now, downforce rating 0.7 on a scale of 0, low downforce, 1 high downforce. So this is one of the higher downforce tracks on the calendar, and teams will be running very, very close to Monaco spec rear wings here. Again, as you would expect for a track with pretty short straights, the full throttle percentage is pretty low at 50%. And like I mentioned before, the corner tendency is medium. So you don't have a ton of high-speed corners like you do at Spa. You do have a couple, slow-speed corners, but there tends to be a lot of kind of medium-ish speed corners, which is definitely not particularly helpful for overtaking opportunities. Now, pole win percentage is very, very low. Since 2010, it's at 33%. And in fact, the pole sitter has not won around this track since 2020. So it'll be interesting to see if the streak ends this year. I think realistically, there's going to be two drivers in the front for fight for pole this year. And if the other one, if one driver starts P2, gets a better start, gets ahead of the other, by the first corner, I think very likely to get pole Wayne get the win this weekend. But we shall see if that pole winless streak continues this weekend. Now, in terms of rookies out qualifying their more experienced teammates around this track, 32%, they're able to do so 32% of the time, which ranks 14th out of the 24 tracks on this year's calendar, so right about average. In terms of safety car percentage, since 2006, it's 32%, which is a bit, I would say, a bit on the lower side. And again, before that, safety car very, very rare. So again, not really representative of the profitabilities for modern day F1. And like I said, pretty old circuit, pretty historic circuit for on the F1 calendar. And this circuit's first race was held in 1986. Now, tires for this weekend, we're looking at tires on the softer end of the Pirelli range, as you would expect. Hard C3, medium C4, and the soft C5 tires. So not quite the softest in the Pirelli range. We're not using the C6 this weekend, but it is quite a lot softer than what we saw last time out in Spa. Now, the weather for this weekend is quite up in the air. It does look like it's going to be a pretty mixed up weekend. Again, where you're going to have quite different weather for all three main days of running. So for Friday, FP1, 1:30 p.m. local time, followed by Formula 2 qualifying at 3:55 p.m. FP2, 5 p.m. and the expected weather for FP2 is 27 degrees and sunny. Saturday, FP3, 12:30 p.m. followed by the Formula 2 sprint race at 2:15 p.m. and qualifying at 4 p.m. And the expected weather for qualifying is 27 degrees with a very, very mixed, unclear. It's very unclear what the weather is going to be for qualifying. It could be sunny, it could be cloudy, it could even be rainy. Based on the website that I used for this, there's 20% chance of precipitation at the start of qualifying. So again, you could have a wet track, or you could even have a slightly dying track, because I think there's a little bit more weather, a little bit more rain expected earlier in the afternoon. Now for Sunday, Formula 2 feature race at 10 a.m. with the Grand Prix being at 3 p.m. sharp. The weather for the Grand Prix, again, quite up in the air. Could be cloudy, could be rainy. As of recording of this video, percentage of precipitation is 25%, with the expected temperature being around 27 degrees. So we do see temperatures kind of dropping off as the weekend goes along. So that does mean that, assuming we have a dry race on Sunday, it means that the long run data that teams get from FP2 on Friday may not be particularly representative when it comes to the race, which will throw a bit of a curveball in the mix and might make the race unpredictable. I don't think it will change the team that wins the Grand Prix, but it could definitely mix up the two packs behind McLaren. Now, in terms of last year's race, this was one of the more controversial races last year. This was, of course, Oscar Piastri's maiden Grand Prix win, of course, winning from Lando Norris second, and Charles Leclerc rounded out the podium in third. At the start of the Grand Prix, Lando Norris started on pole, and this was kind of one of the first races in a trend where Norris would get pole position and lose that lead right off the line. Piastri basically opportunistically takes the lead at the start. Verstappen basically gets ahead, but kind of overtakes him off track, so he's basically forced to give back the position. Of course, this is 2024, not 2025, so the McLarens were not this super dominant, all-conquering car like they are this year. And so while the McLarens had a 1-2, there was some pressure from the Ferraris, the McLaren, the Mercedes, and the Red Bulls behind to keep them on their toes with strategy, and this would be something that would end up biting them back a little bit later in the Grand Prix. So of course, another big moment from the Grand Prix was the contact between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen down at turn 1. Verstappen going very, very aggressive, trying to overtake Hamilton, not able to do so, and he was very, very unhappy with the strategy at this race, undercut by both Hamilton and by Leclerc after the first round of pit stops, I believe. Now, of course, in this race, of course, Piastri was leading, but funnily enough, McLaren seemed to be favoring Lando Norris with strategy, giving him preferential strategy, pinning him first, so basically to try to give cover from the cars behind to maintain that 1-2. And in the process, after the second pit stop, Norris ended up ahead of Piastri, pretty much entirely due to McLaren basically pitting Norris, I think, 1 or 2 laps before Piastri. And of course, this led to the very, very awkward team orders decision in the closing stages of the race, where Norris was basically asked to give the position back to Piastri. Duly did so in, I think, the closing 10 laps of the Grand Prix, which allowed Piastri, of course, to win his first ever F1 Grand Prix in probably not quite the situation that he, circumstances, that's a better word, circumstances that he would have imagined. So again, quite a bit of controversy followed from that race, and again, in some ways, I think it did set the stage for what would happen later in the season, but also, again, I think kind of it was really a turning point, I think, in the dynamic between the two of them, given that Norris had basically had the measure of Piastri for most of their first year and a half together as teammates, but that was kind of a real turning point, and kind of we can see that now, with hindsight a year later, that Piastri and Norris are now the two drivers that are fighting out for the 2025 drivers title. Now, in terms of best qualifiers at this track compared to their career average, number 1 is Esteban Ocon, a race winner around this track, of course, 43% better than his average, with a median qualifying gap of 0.062 seconds in his favor. Number 2 is Lando Norris, plus 29%, median qualifying gap of 0.136 seconds in his favor. Norris, of course, has never been out-qualified by a teammate at this track, so it'll be interesting to see if that record continues this weekend. And number 3 is Nico Hülkenberg, plus 28%, with a median qualifying gap of 0.511 seconds in his favor. Now, 3 worst qualifiers at this track. Number 1 is Charles Leclerc, negative 36%, median qualifying gap of positive 0.146. Number 2 is Yuki Tsunoda, minus 25%, but again, very small sample size with Tsunoda. He's only done 4 qualifying sessions at this track, with a median qualifying gap of positive 0.022 seconds. And number 3 is Pierre Gasly, minus 20%, median qualifying gap of positive 0.117 seconds. Now, in terms of the 10 drivers who are predicted to out-qualify their teammates this weekend, they are as follows. So Norris, Hamilton, Verstappen, Russell, Alonso, Gasly, Ocon, Hadjar, Albon, and Hulkenberg. In terms of the gaps, I think a little bit probably going to be a little bit off compared to what they will end up being. I think the Verstappen-Tsunoda one is a little bit big. Verstappen has an excellent record on this track. Tsunoda, again, not so much here, but I do think 7/10 is a little bit large. The Russell-Antonelli one's also a little bit big, but again, Russell does have a pretty good record here. Kind of going the other way, I think the Gasly Colapinto one's probably a little bit small. 1,000ths of a second is basically dead even. But that being said, Gasly does have a pretty poor record around this track. But Colapinto has really, really struggled on one-lap pace this year, only qualifying Gasly the one time in Canada. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on against Gasly. And kind of based on the rumors that are coming around, he could be under a lot of pressure to retain his seat even after the summer break after this Grand Prix. Now, in terms of predictions for this weekend, I think pretty easy to predict the top 2. I think it's going to be McLaren 1-2. Now, we've had a couple of tracks this year where Norris has had a perfect qualifying record, and those were, I think, Austria and Britain. He ended up winning both of those Grand Prix. One of them, Austria, really, really solid performance from him. British Grand Prix got a little bit of help from the stewards there, but still won the Grand Prix. So I think this time out, I am going to predict Norris victory. His qualifying record here is excellent. And again, while pole position has not been super important here in the past, it'll be interesting to see again how he bounces back from what was, I think, a little bit of a suboptimal weekend at Spa. That being said, Piastri I'm predicting second, but then again, I expect it to be very, very close between the two McLaren drivers. Now, rounding out the podium in third, I think recently I've been predicting George Russell, but Russell's had a pretty rough time with things lately with Mercedes, and they've kind of been solidly the 4th best team for the last couple of Grand Prix now. So I think probably I'm not going to predict a Russell podium. I think Leclerc would be a good bet here, but he has a pretty terrible record at this track. So I'm going to go with Verstappen getting his first podium here since first podium just in general since the Canadian Grand Prix, which is quite a while ago now at this point. So there you go. That is my preview for the 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix. Should be a good one. I'm back home now after my trip, so I should be able to do a full review for the Grand Prix with power rankings as well. Formula 2, can't say for sure, but again, I think it really depends on timing and things like that. So again, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.